Hello, everybody. My name is Mariette Abrahams, CEO and founder of Qina, and welcome to our third edition for women leading in science and nutrition. And I'm joined today by Shola Oladipo, soon to be Dr. Shola Oladipo, and Doctor Magnolia Pretell. They will both introduce themselves as well. And so I thank you for your time, and I'm sure we have a very, very interesting and packed hour for you lined up. So I'll hand over to Magnolia.
Hello, beautiful ladies. Well, I'm a founder of Some Wellness, and we are really happy to have Shola today. So we're waiting to get to know your journey and all the message you have for us today.
Brilliant.
Great. Good. So Shola, you and I have come a long way for many years already. So I would love for the audience to get to know you and learn about your history and kind of where you got to where you are today. So if you could just start by maybe introducing yourself, and I'll throw in the first question already lined up in there is, how did you end up becoming a dietitian, first of all? So a little bit about that whole journey.
Thank you. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Mariette. It's lovely to be with you, and it's great to meet you, Magnolia. So I am Shola Oladipo. Goodness, I wear so many hats, so I have to be very focused about the hats that I'm wearing on this platform. So I'm a registered dietitian, been a dietitian for 27 years. Most of my career has been in the NHS. And I've done a little stint in industry. That's where I met the lovely Dr. Consal, Mariette. And I left the NHS about 5 years ago to start Food for Purpose, which is a nutrition and wellness platform. We're a CIC, so we're a non-for-profit based in the UK, and we're dedicated to culturally relevant solutions for Black and brown people. That's, in a nutshell, particularly around culture, health and faith, and that paradigm and how it affects, addressing chronic health, but also around health perceptions. So my dietetic career, so that's me. I'm also a researcher, just writing my thesis now. My thesis is actually around, again, Black health, but I'm using the Black majority church as a case study, really looking at the role of church leaders and how they influence, or they may influence, health decisions. So looking at church-based health interventions around the avoidance or management of chronic illness. I'm looking at health perceptions from a cultural, religious, spiritual viewpoints, and where do people feel health and illness come from. And I'm also writing a paper, a really exciting piece around the views of Black majority church leaders on the campaign for the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine.
Wow. So we'll come back to the research, because that's really a mouthful, and really love to dig into that, because decision making is a huge topic, and one that we really, or most of the time, don't have good insight into, because we are so short on time. And so you quickly want to go to the symptom and solve the problem without really getting a good insight. But if you take us back to, once you finished high school, and kind of what made you think nutrition is the way to go? Nutrition is my future, and this is where my career is going to take me.
Interesting, because nutrition was never my future. I was, in my heart, I always wanted to be an industrial pharmacist. And that was planted into my head.
I didn't know about you.
No, Food is medicine, right? Food is medicine.
I wanted to be an industrial pharmacist. And then all of a sudden, I got married quite young. So I got married when I was 19. And then things kind of changed. And I started to be interested in food and science. And how I became a dietitian is quite interesting. So one day, I had my first child when I was 22. And one day I was standing in front of the mirror. At 22, young mum, beautiful baby. I looked in the mirror and I recognized the baby, but I didn't recognize the woman carrying my child. And it was me. And literally what happened was I'd gone from, I don't know, a BMI of maybe 22 or something to a BMI about 30 something in about 1.5 years. So, you know, in like stones, in old money, I've gone from about 12 stones to almost 20 something stones. And it was just crazy because I didn't notice it happen. Obviously, having a child and, you know, eating for two, as it were. I was definitely eating for three. But what was interesting was insidious. It was insidious. I never noticed it happened. Said to my husband, how come this has happened to me? How did you let this happen? Went to see my GP in floods of tears because I thought, you know, a GP will help me. I need to lose this weight. And my GP was a lovely Caucasian gentleman. Went in to see him. He didn't weigh me. He didn't ask me about what I ate or about my culture or anything. He was lovely though. He gave me a resource of what we call a diet sheet or a resource. It looked as though it had been photocopied at least 1 million times. And he mumbled something about not eating rice and not eating potatoes. I went home, as you can imagine, cried even more. And my husband said to me, you can continue to cry or you can actually do something about this. So basically, you've been to see someone at a very vulnerable time in your life. As a new mom, you know, you've looked at your size, your risk for illnesses has increased, and you've not received the reception you expected. So that was why I signed up to be a dietitian. So I went to what was then the Polytechnic of London, North London. That was in 1992. And yeah, you know, did my degree. It used to be 4 years then. And started at the Royal Free Hospital in Hampstead, where I was what you call a general dietitian, or we used to call them basic grades then. I think they're band 5s now. And then quickly moved and cut my teeth on oncology and HIV. And I spent about 3 or 4 years in oncology and HIV. And then I left the hospital environment and went to work in the community. And that was really where my eyes were open to, you know, the huge difference in patient behaviors of being in that hospital bed and having a consultation and being in their own homes and actually implementing the consultation, and just the naivety, my personal naivety of working in the hospital and assuming that, you know, you give someone a prescription of here's 5 things to do, and then you visit them in their homes, and something like, you know, not having a fridge that works, not understanding the language in which the, you know, the resource was written, just completely affects how people follow those prescriptions. And they were really prescriptions. There wasn't a two-way conversation. It was very much, you know, this is what you should do. And it wasn't really tailored. And I just realized that in the community, you really see people in their own habitat. And over the years, I, you know, moved to industry. So worked for Nestle, and where I met Mariette. And that was quite a different angle of nutrition and dietetics, really quite commercial, really about the, you know,
sorry, just get a question in there, because I'm interested in the transition and the knowledge that you gathered, because even the step moving from, you know, clinical or, you know, I would say hospital care to then community care and then into industry, what would you say are the skills and the knowledge gaps that you identified that you needed to pick up? Because you could have just carried on with what you knew, what you did in the hospital, and then just like transplanted it onto the community, isn't it? And then take your community knowledge and then transplanted that into industry. I mean, I think sometimes people take for granted that it does take a mental shift and you know, a knowledge shift to be able to communicate with who you are with at that time, right? So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking that question. And you really made me just, you know, reflect on what that was. And can I just say, I think wherever I am or have been, I've always wanted to challenge the status quo. So I don't do same old. I don't do normal. And can I be honest? My transition was, I was actually headhunted for the job at Nestle. My transition was because I was tired of being told we can't do it that way. And we can't do this. You know, it can't be done that way because we are in the confines of the NHS. So it came at a time where I was on the cusp of leaving dietetics and going back to perhaps my dream of industrial pharmacy or teaching, because I really realized how much I enjoyed teaching. And I thought, okay, working in industry might give me a different angle of dietetics and might make me fall in love again with a profession that I'm actually falling out of love because it felt so constricted and so lacking in innovation. And, pardon to my colleagues who've, have had the opportunity to innovate in their areas, but I felt as a profession, compared with our counterparts and medics, I just felt that we were a little bit behind and we weren't moving at that pace. And if we weren't lacking in ideas. So I am a blue sky girl. I live in the clouds. I want to prospect, and I don't want to hear, it's never done that way. We can't do that. Or we might be able to do that in 100 years' time. I want to test the water now. And I felt that was lacking. So already I had that appetite to do something different. And then this challenge came to come and work for, a massive conglomerate based in Switzerland, which would, involve obviously a lot of travel, etc. But I was ready for that because I felt that my mind was always that I'd come back to the NHS. But I thought if I leave for a little bit, I will bring something that companies like Nestle are changing, narratives, changing the world, but I felt they were doing it through a different route, understanding what people needed. And I thought, if I can go in that route, learn something more, learn about influencers and influencing, I can bring that back to the NHS. So I think I was quite ready, although you're never really ready for that kind of full transition, but it was something, I wanted something different. I was tired of, we ain't got enough money, or we can't do that. I was tired of it.
Yeah. And I think it's so important because I think a lot of people, they are unhappy or they are itching, but the discomfort or the backlash that they might receive might be too huge, too huge to overcome, or not knowing what to say or what to do at the right time. And I think it's very important to highlight that it's okay to be unhappy, and because that will drive you to do something else and to be bigger and to strive for the clouds and even beyond the clouds,
So I have the courage to speak it up, to create your new narrative, the support that you have. It's incredible. I'm happy you made that.
I'm so glad I did, and thank you, Mariette, and Mariette, for that encouragement. And I just have to remind myself how lonely it was. So I have to just say that nutrition and dietetics is still quite a white middle class profession. Think about when I qualified and when I'm talking about 90s and 2000s, it still was not very diverse. So it was, here was this very atypical Black dietitian moving into an area that there were no Black dietitians working in industry at the time. Mariette, you know what it was like when you first came in. We were groundbreaking. So there was that kind of sort of, shall I jump? Should I jump? And it was quite lonely because of that. But also, and I know this has changed now, but I felt quite ostracized by the profession. So then, as a dietitian, you either worked in the NHS or you worked in the NHS. And if you did anything different, you were seen as, some people have told me that I'd gone to the dark side, that I was betraying the profession because we were going into industry, and industry was dirty because it was all about money, where obviously Mariette and I know, and I'm sure you do, Magnolia, that it's not. It's about innovation. It's about influence. It's about having your voice heard and bringing your ideas to the table, which, we had a great opportunity to change the development of products, to influence how products were introduced, to meet key opinion leaders, to actually be part of those key opinion leaders and have our voices around tables. That I think as Black dietitians was quite an unusual opportunity. So it was a step of faith, but sometimes it was very lonely.
Yeah. And then when you were in the industry, what new things did you learn? Because even that, then, I mean, talking for myself as well, it's a little bit of a culture shock. The first 6 months, you don't really know what's happening to you. And you have all these ideas flying and what's possible or not. But I do think then you need to come, back again and think, okay, very clear. This is what I know, this is what I don't know, and this is where we are heading. So what was that journey like for you?
I have to say, industry is not for the faint-hearted, because I think the cushion of the NHS was gone. It was very much, so you are here, what's your idea? We want to hear from you. And people would sit around a table and you'd be sitting with marketeers, so people who want to create. You'd be sitting with around the table with people, salespeople, people who want to sell. So you didn't have time to get into your favorite gear and think, well, you know, like in the NHS, we'll just have a meeting and, you know, we'll talk about this and I'll come back to you. It was like now, and there was very much an immediacy. So there was a lot, for me, it was like, oh my goodness, like we're working in real time, like now. And it was about, you know, you were part of a chain where you couldn't just, you know, have your little meeting and then sort of file your notes in a cupboard and come back to it later. My decisions, our decisions as clinicians, as in nutrition, were directly affecting the bottom line, i.e. the decisions that we made or didn't make would affect the marketing team, which would affect the sales team, which would affect the bottom line. So finance was so important. Understanding, you know, profit and loss was important, and understanding that we were part of this. And when I worked in the NHS at that time, that really wasn't very clear. It was, we kind of, you know, it was us and the patients. I think working in industry made me to see the multifacets of what running a business looked like. Leadership, good leadership was crucial because the pressure was so high. And I wasn't prepared for, you know, those deadlines were real. They weren't like, you know, can I come and do it tomorrow? If a product was being launched at a certain time, or a concept was being launched at a certain time, I'm sure you remember some of our encounters, Mariette, you couldn't just negotiate it because the decision had been made higher up. It was very much us trying to work around those. So it was definitely a change in mindset, but I also learned the importance of balance, because there was a tendency to overwork, to take your work everywhere with you. And I think what was crucial for me, one of the things I learned was about balance.
Yeah, that's it.
So I have a curiosity, Shola. What were the main misunderstandings, misconceptions, or bias that you found in your journey towards clinical, to the community, and to the industry?
In terms of the biases that I experienced?
Yeah, biases, misconceptions regarding to, because you address a certain type of communities, you have to raise your voice and things that people were not paying attention before. And so what are the things that you have to, the struggles that you have to, you know, mindset and these misconceptions and biases?
I think there are quite a few. I think some of those that I remember were, even working in industry, was to avoid being generalized, so that the UK, what worked in the UK didn't necessarily work in other markets and vice versa. And I think some of the things that I had to do, and I think Mariette also, was to really put our foot down and say, this wouldn't work here. One size does not fit all. And I think, you know, we were quite a small team, so we had to be very assertive and really ensure that we, you know, our voices were heard and we had clear rationale. So one thing I think was, it wasn't good enough to just say, I don't think this will work. You needed to have some clinical backing, and that was where using the evidence base to challenge. So I think one of the things I had to learn was to challenge narratives. And sometimes, you know, those narratives would mean a whole change of direction, because an assumption had been made that this would work in the UK and it didn't. Sometimes that was quite difficult, because you could have been deemed as, you know, difficult to work with or not towing the line. But I'm glad that where questions need to be asked, and decisions need to be overturned, I'm glad that we did, because it made a difference to the UK market and the shape. I think that one of the other things was actually being Black women in, again, you know, still quite a white dominated, male dominated community. So as we got higher up, it got more and more white. And I think, again, it was understanding our individuality, embracing that, and not feeling threatened.
Yeah. I think that is definitely a very good point, because from a business perspective, we needed to be very good at communicating,
Yeah.
not only our technical expertise, but also, our I would say market expertise. Yeah. So what we understood, practitioners wanted, or what patients wanted. But then there was an internal communication about those biases and barriers that so there was an enhanced level of communication that we needed to overcome. And I think one of the things that certainly that shifted for me was that when you reach that industry level, and even if it's, it goes white or paler as you go up, there does come a point where actually it doesn't matter so much, because when the numbers come back and actually you can prove that you were correct, then it doesn't matter anymore. And so now, for me, that attitude has much more been, I forget about it now, because people like the way I see now, people don't think about, hey, is Oprah Black? I mean, because they forgot. Successful and such a powerful, people don't think about it anymore. So I think once people realize that you are at a certain level, you can stand your ground, you can validate your opinions, then sort of there's a shift that happens, but it's very hard to get to that point.
Correct. Yeah, I think the result, ultimately the results speak, don't they? Ultimately the results speak. But I think it's one thing, Magnolia, that I definitely learned was resilience. Not for the faint-hearted, it's not for the crybabies. You've got to put on your big girl pants and stick by your guns, particularly when people are questioning how can this be right and why is it right, and really stick into those guns, because it's ultimately it wasn't just about you, it's about the whole unit. And I think working in industry just helped me to understand the knock-on effect. Any decision that I made at whatever level would affect those above me, those on either side of me, and those below me. So it was crucial that I was not just moving because people were disagreeing or I felt pressurized. I think one of the things I learned was this phrase, healthy tension. And I think one of the things I looked for around tables was healthy tension. I think some of the most unsettling times were when everyone around the table agreed with me. That was unsettling, because the healthy tensions were quite important, actually, and we couldn't always agree on everything all the time. I learned about the benefits of healthy tensions, i.e. people that are questioning. I think when we were not questioning things, it was quite a dangerous place to be in.
Absolutely. So we're going to move on a little bit now from the industry. And then what happened? Guess
what? I went back to the NHS. Do you know what? I tell you what, I felt armed and ready. I had learned so much. Another thing was actually maximizing your day. So often in industry, the day started much earlier. So we had meetings in Switzerland at 8:15 in Switzerland. So you're waking up in the UK, your meeting starts at 8:15. But I noticed that the way the day was used was quite different. People used their time and they took breaks. But I have to say, efficiency was on my mind. So I came back to the NHS thinking, right, I know so much more about productivity, efficiency, the bottom line, money, profitability, sales, marketing, being commercial, and communication. I want to bring this back. I went into a community role. Oh my goodness. And I just didn't fit in anymore. It was not for me. I really didn't fit in. I stayed for 8 months in that post, was really unhappy. And then I was headhunted for another role. And I think that's where I really cut my teeth in leadership in the NHS. So I was leading a dietetic team of about 120 staff. So a massive community team across Kent. And I also led the continence team, which was quite interesting. So the sort of title that people gave to me was the manager that oversaw from the gum to the bum. So everything that goes, gum to bum. But then I realized that I had now developed transferable skills. So it didn't matter that I was managing dietitians, I was managing nurses, physiotherapists, a whole admin, a central admin team. Didn't matter, because I realize now that you've got some skills that are transferable: leadership, communication, governance, risk. Those skills go across the board, and also conflict resolution.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I think for those are my latter days in the NHS, and I began to challenge, I began to look at productivity, we began to look at income generation. And I'm really happy to say that, we were those services, the services that I led with a fantastic managers. We were profitable every year. We were making savings every year. We were, hitting targets, beating targets, innovating ferociously. But I guess I feel that we were probably a little bit before our time, because we weren't able to income generate as much as I think some services within the NHS and those that have been, broken up and partnered with other organizations are now. But we were certainly at the stage where, we were profitable, even if the NHS itself was losing money. But then I started to notice what I'll call my people of color. And I noticed that although we were delivering great services, I noticed that there was no change in the narrative around the numbers, the prevalence of avoidable chronic illness in my community. So people were still coming to me saying, I've got type 2 diabetes. People were still coming saying, I've got hypertension. But they were also coming saying, I'm not taking my medication. I'm also a church leader, married to a church leader. So a lot of our friends are church leaders. And people would say things to me like, I'm not taking my medication, I'm praying about it. And I'll be like, right, so, how do you find the NHS? And they'd say things like, oh, they don't really understand us. They don't really care about us, as Black people. This country makes people ill. And I was kept on hearing this. And it was, again, like I keep saying, I'm just not same old, same old. I kept on hearing that and thinking, Shola, this is an opportunity to do something with a group that have high risk for avoidable chronic illness that is costing the NHS, the government, and themselves. It's costing families. And it's an area that you are in. You're a dietitian, you're a minority amongst dietetics. You've got skills that could support this community. So I left the NHS and started Food for Purpose. And we started to build services that suited vulnerable communities, particularly communities which were not hard to reach, as people say, but hardly reached. And I started to search back in my dietetic career and used to think, hang on, where were those tailored services for people of color? There weren't any. Where were the programs that suited people who ate different types of food? There weren't any. Where are those resources in, public health, which talk about the foods that perhaps people from Africa, the Caribbean, I think even there were better resources for Asian communities, but there was nothing, hardly anything out there for Black African Caribbeans. It was too juicy for me to not do anything about. So I started this company really thinking we can make a change to health at this level, but we can also make a change at health at this level. And we can start by listening to the concerns of the people around me. And I started to understand the dynamic between health decisions, faith, perceptions, culture, and just start to build those things into programs. And we started to deliver these programs. And long story short, after we're 5 years old now, we've won a number of awards. We've been really blessed to be funded by public health, local communities, academia, to deliver culturally relevant health interventions that make a difference and that are meaningful to people. But while we're doing this, we're also learning. So I started my research in 2019. And that has also helped me to again understand the need for very specific services for these small communities. Well, can I say communities that are perhaps not small, but almost hidden communities. They're not coming out to talk about their health issues because they don't feel that they matter. They don't feel that their voices are heard. I think COVID, Black Lives Matter, the SEWE report have really put the spotlight now on culture, faith, health. I think when I was in the NHS, I just remember that it seemed very squeamish. Nobody would talk about culture, faith, health in one sentence because they're afraid that, oh, it's going to sound racist. It's going to sound, and this is the crux of the services that will make a difference are those that need to work for the people that we want to make a difference for. And that's how Food for Purpose came about.
Beautiful.
So I'm interested to hear if you can give a little bit more detail about, how does Food for Purpose differ to a, bog standard diabetes prevention program? What is it that you are offering and delivering differently to what's already available on a global scale?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good question.
That's
so
how.
I have to say that we're Black-led, which makes a huge difference. Yeah.
Right.
So the foundation is lived experience.
Right.
So we understand some of the issues already. But then I think the beauty is that we're talking to people and asking them.
Yes.
We're asking people what works well and what doesn't work well. We're helping to understand where people's mindsets are, and we're delivering in environments that people find most conducive. So there's an assumption, or there was an assumption, because I think we've moved on. There was an assumption that people will either come to the clinic or they'll come to the clinic. But actually, coming to the clinic, it sounds silly, doesn't it? And I remember managing dietetics teams, and if people didn't come to the clinic, they got a letter. What a huge assumption that they even can read your letter, that they understand your letter, or dare I say that they want to come to a clinic and feel that this will be the best environment for them. So what we do differently is we are meeting people in spaces that matter most to them, in their homes, in faith settings, so in the mosque, in the church, in community centers, or online, at times that are more suitable to them, with solutions that, in our research and our preamble, our insights, with solutions that are meaningful to them. So it has their foods. What's different is you won't see our resources are tailored to Black African, Black Caribbean, to the point where, we're looking now at different regions. Africa is a continent. Oftentimes people talk about Africa as though it's a country.
Yeah.
And I often laugh that, there's a big difference between what people in East Africa and West Africa eat. So when people say African diets, what an anomaly. That doesn't exist. And we're looking at that granular level. So when we're speaking to someone who's from Ghana, we're talking about their foods at a very granular level, rather than starch, proteins and fruit and veg. We're speaking to them in a language that they understand. And we're differentiating that from somebody who's from Jamaica, because often we say, again, a misnomer is Black. I know we use it, but what a misnomer. It's so different to be from Jamaica and to be from Nigeria. The diets are very similar, but they're so different. And it is those idiosyncrasies that we treat. That's our bag. With the difference between rice and beans and rice and peas on paper looks very similar, but it's such a huge difference. And therefore, if you're not speaking that language to clients, they feel it's not for them. And a lot of the feedback we'd had from clients was, I can't see that dietitian, she doesn't understand me. But when she asks me what I eat, I try to tell her in a way that she will understand. So I don't tell her about our foods. And we're like, you need to be talking about our foods. So we are those that will go there. We will talk about our foods. We'll talk about the culture. We will analyze our foods and bring it to a meaningful solution, which I feel that, I guess, the bigger organizations don't have the opportunity to do, because they are tailoring their resources to the masses. We are not. We're looking for
appetite.
Correct.
Skip the plan.
I do experiment the same thing. I really feel very what you talk. It's just it's really what I also kind of working on, because most of the genetic reports is based in US view or how 18 or like everything is in English, and the fact that it's translated to Portuguese or Spanish, and you kind of like understand what people normally eat in the culture in different countries. It's so makes so much difference. It makes so much difference. It's definitely not only based on your genes, which is I work, is also understand the culture and how people also celebrate food together. You know, it's also the way they do it. If you can talk their own the way to see it, you just make more impact. Definitely.
Yeah.
Correct.
So that was still not enough for you then, making such an impact and meeting people where they are, and the quality insights that you were getting for that you needed to do more. And then you decided PhD is the way to go.
Yeah, do you know what, Mariette? And I think I have to say, you know, high five you. I think you've been a great inspiration to me to go for to do more. You have definitely been an inspiration. And I remember you talking about your PhD when you were going to start it. And I think it was your quest, you know, like you have this quest for more. And I realized that, you know, we can be Oliver Twist. We can bring our plate and say, please, sir, can I have some more? But that more it doesn't always mean that somebody's going to come and put that spoon and serve your plate. You might have to go to the buffet and serve yourself. And that's what I decided to do. I was like, there's more to this. And, you know, I was provoked by people like yourself, Mariette, but I was also provoked by some of the narratives that would come back to me when I would talk about what we call, let's say, Black health. And some of them were, yeah, that sounds really good, but there isn't data to support that. And I was tired of hearing people like, we would do this work with people of color, but they're so hard to reach. Or, oh, you know, African diets, Caribbean diets, they're too starchy. And I was like, okay, this needs to stop. But the only way that we can do that and do it powerfully is to develop peer-reviewed work. So I felt I needed to move into another arena where I could influence. So I was understood and enjoyed influence throughout my career. And I was thinking, okay, the next place is academia. So I just looked around and looked at academic institutions in the UK, and I found that there was a limit to people like me that were looking at this area. I did find a fantastic professor, though, Professor Deborah Lysett, who was looking at faith and health. But then I realized that there was nobody like Shola. There was nobody who was coming from a Black, African, Caribbean viewpoint. And I thought, okay, once again, this is your opportunity to not do same old, same old. This is your opportunity to say, look, here's the data. This isn't something I'm just saying. I've got peer-reviewed data here. It was too juicy to not do the PhD. And I think, you know, I started my PhD when I was 50 in 2019. And I just remembered the day I called you, Mariette, and said, I've started my PhD. And you were like, yes, go girl. And I think I just had to remind myself that this is going to be tough, you know, with 4 children and all of the stuff you do, but this is going to be exciting and it's going to be groundbreaking. And Shola, this is the stuff that you wake up, you get out of bed for. So it had to happen, Mariette and Magnolia. There was it had to happen. And, you know, it's exciting. As I come to the end, I'm rubbing my hand and saying, right, so what's next? Because those changes, I think we can make change at any angle. But I felt that I needed to hit academia in a place that it would sit up and listen, because the findings were very nuanced. They were very, it's been said, or, you know, in brackets, no author. I want to be that author. I want to speak to other authors. I want to build a community where we're speaking and we're challenging and we are bringing information to the table. So that we can build, it's about better health for everyone.
Exactly.
And it's not going to happen.
Understanding everybody.
Yeah.
It's like everybody wants to be seen. Everybody wants to be seen.
Come on.
Yeah,
We've
and,
got to do it
data
ourselves.
is the key. Yeah,
Come
data
on.
is definitely key. And one of the things that I also want to highlight is that, and you and I both share this, that we both did our PhDs on topics that we felt passionate about, that we wanted to only do it if it was on our topic.
Come on.
So I think that's another kind of beyond the it's got to be done. It's time to push the boundaries. Also, there's impact, and there are obvious big spaces that need to be filled. And if you don't step up, nobody's going to bring it to you. And I think that's where you really, really have kind of, let up, and all of a sudden you're the only one. You find out, wait, you're the only, social enterprise now that delivers these, innovative programs that actually have a real impact. And I'm sure, with your PhD, will show that has significant health outcomes as well, because the adherence is much better. The inclusion, and it's much better. The representation is much better, and so that is so important. So I think for you, the move to academia has been another feather. The hat is getting full now, but another feather in your cap. But it builds one on the other, I think, isn't it? If you think about when you were 19, where you would end up now, I think there's this, preconceived idea that a lot of people know exactly what to do. But the career, especially when you are, I think, entrepreneurial, and want to drive impact, is not so clean cut. And I think that's where people need to get out of their path and comfort zone to then say, hey, actually, and this is the purpose of what Magnolia and I are trying to do with this, to show that you don't have to have the, full scholarship PhD with the topic that you absolutely don't have no interest in, and can't do anything else, can't have the family, can't have, do you know what I mean? So I think this is really what we are trying to show here. But what I want to move on to also is to now, how have you now merged your academic, interests, skills, qualifications together now with the entrepreneurial side? Because that's really the beauty of the marriage, because a lot of people with PhDs then go into postdocs, and then postdocs and postdocs, whereas not us are doing it. So what is your story? What do you think?
Great question,
drives
Mary.
you to merge those?
Great question. So now, we have now a posture within Food for Purpose where we're not only scouting for business, we are also proposing actions to local government, charities, academia, because of the knowledge that we have. And we are saying this work needs to be done for these communities. You might not be able to do it, but here's a proposal to show you that we can do this, and this is how it can be done. But we don't want to do it alone, because if you do it alone, you can go fast. We want to do it together because we can go far. And we want this to be beyond now the Black community. How about looking at other communities? How about looking at other areas and bringing in other strands? So ultimately, this is something that, we don't need Food for Purpose to teach people. It becomes the norm. So considering someone's background, faith, culture, health perceptions, belief, genetics becomes the norm. So that's where we're looking at now. But I think the beauty also for me is that I've started another limited company myself as a researcher, because a lot of my research has really taken quite a niche, looking at, something like vaccine uptake and the element of, trust, and how ethnic communities perceive health, illness, trust. And therefore, the other feather, I guess, in my cap is working as a researcher with other organizations, not just about nutrition now, but looking at health as a whole, but with what I know about health decisions, self-agency, health belief models, I can bring that to the table to help any organizations actually that are looking to work with diverse communities. So the pandemic, I think, was really something that helped me to understand that I have skills that could, it's COVID, it was COVID today, it could be something else tomorrow. We still need to understand what certain communities feel, understand, what their perceptions of medicine, illness, wellness, healing
Technology.
are in order to have an effective rollout for whatever the treatment may be. So yeah, I run another company now, and you know, I deliver that. So that's been a great opportunity to again make another difference in this whole melee of, you know, needs.
Yeah, and I think it's brilliant, because I think also that, you know, from people who I've spoken to who are, you know, traditionally trained as dietitians, think, well, it's not only dietitian and it's only one-on-one, you know, patient work, but look at all the other things, all the skills that, you know, if you hone in on it, you do the work, you can combine so many other ancillary skills to your hat that you can deliver to enterprises and not undersell yourself and have these self-limiting beliefs, which I know Magnolia is huge on, in terms of these, you know, self-limiting beliefs, and that you can actually add to your skill set. You are not just limited to delivering, you know, coaching. And some people love it, some people are great at it. I know I'm not great on one-on-one coaching. I've also moved past that, but I think it's important to know that there are other things that make you marketable in the industry. It's not as, I would say, as desirable to just have a PhD. You should come to the table knowing that I can talk business, I can do proposals, you know, I can deliver projects, I can do business plan, I can, you know, that's I think the bigger thinking that I think a lot of people in profession need to understand, that it is possible. It is not impossible, and it's not, but you need to put in the work. And it's not about being smart. It's about doing the work. You're going to have to give up some sacrifices. You're going to have to, but in the long run, there's more feathers. And I think that's what's going to drive the industry also, and the profession as a whole, forward. What do you think lies ahead for you and for the profession?
I think, Mariette, and I think, again, you've really provoked this. I think, you know, the future for this space that I'm in is really, you know, completing that cycle. And now, you know, I've looked at sort of, you know, health, faith, culture. I think now I'd like to bring it round to some of the science and the tech, and look at, you know, and I feel that people are ready. You know, people used to be scared of tech when you talked about tech. And when I say people, I'm talking about, you know, the clients and service users. But I think people are ready. You know, we all hold this phone that does everything, and there are apps now, and people get it. People are less afraid. I think it's time to start to bring in the genetics. I think it's time for people to start thinking about, you know, nutrigenomics. And I think, in a way, again, that it's not, people don't see it as it's for the people up there. It's actually something for Joe Public to start to digest, because it's happening as we speak. It's like 3G. 3G is there. We just can't see it. Nutrigenomics is happening, and has been for a while. It's there. And I think it's in products, it's their services that are so mature. But I feel that I have a role to start to bring it to the communities, particularly that I work with, but also to spread that message to Joe Public, because it shouldn't come and bite us on the bum as a surprise. It's here and it's now. And I think, again, you know, we need to be part of the conversations. So I think that's the next step for me. How do I bring that in? How do I bring in tech, bring in nutrigenomics? People, do you know, people, I talk to people, Joe Public, and they already say things like, I feel that, you know, there's something about my genes that still isn't understood. I feel that there's something there. And if we don't bring the science, what people do is they run with pseudoscience, and they and lots, you know, all you need to do is open the internet. There's so much there that we need to bring the empirical evidence and present it to the people, and see how this can develop together as a concept that looks like something every day, rather than looks like something that's from Star Trek, and then you get, you know,
absolutely. We can join forces there, because I'm really, that's also one of my what caught my attention to do. And it's funny because when I was doing also research about vitamins and things like that can be used for any ethnicity. And it was this narrative of, oh, you know, we find in this, in the UK, so it's this community, it's this type of population, Danish population, or in the UK, and everybody thinks like it's white. And then when I like look the same SNP in worldwide, it was even higher in, you know, for Africa, because it's kind of like drops the line. So the narrative is not inclusive. Like everybody carries in certain percentages, doesn't work like, okay, these humans have this, these humans don't have this. Really, no, it's like nature is not looking really to segment us. This is what the old past creates. So there is a lot of misconceptions about, and there is already useful information for everybody in the ethnic independence. So we need to spread the word, definitely.
Yeah. And I think it's so important that, you know, you are on the ground, like you know what questions people are asking. That is gold, because, you know, companies don't have that. When they say hard to reach, well, you are the reach. You know, you are the reach, because you're on the other side of a laptop or a phone, or you have that reach. And I think that is what's so powerful, that now you know, the NIH is going with, you know, clinical trials should have a specific data in terms of percentages. And so there's no more hiding of hard to reach. There is now you know, a target that needs to be hit, or transparency that needs to be provided in terms of how far did you go and how hard did you try. And so while people are having these questions, I'm totally agree, it's up to us to provide that, because it all starts with raising awareness and starting the conversation. And that's how we empower people, and with knowledge. And then, because I think a lot of the time it's also, well, the science is not there. Well, that's okay, because the science is an emerging science, but we need to have honest conversations. It's not just, well, people are just not looking at you, or like, sorry, you're not considered, so ask me again in 10 years' time. That's certainly not what we want, because when people are, I think the biggest driver that we know is motivation to change, right? If you have people who are actively motivated to change and engage with their health, that's the time to engage in conversation about what's available, what's possible, and, you know, and what is coming in the future. And so I think you're doing an amazing work, Shola. It's so amazing to hear your journey, and even things that I've learned that I didn't know about you. So you're making such a great impact, and yeah, I wish you all the best for finalizing the last few weeks. Is it last few weeks?
The few months, last few months.
There you go. Can you? I can still remember when you said, "Oh, I'm doing it," and I said, just do it, just do it. It'll be over in a flash. Here we go. I can't believe it. Like, you're ready to hand in. So we definitely will link to Food for Purpose, so that all the listeners can learn more about Food for Purpose, and also on LinkedIn to see what you are up to and the kind of resources that you are putting out there. And also for anybody who's really interested in getting into not only access to the programs in their own county or location, but also looking at the research services that you are offering, which I think will be in huge demand as well. Hopefully, of course, we can all collaborate on that. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. That's been amazing. And yeah, we'll get back to you, and we'll link, put all the links in the descriptions below. So Magnolia, you want to finish us off?
Yes, so I saw your journey, very inspiring, a lot of courage of in the things that you wanted to change, and I wish you all the best endeavors in this.
So much.
And
thanks
then
so much, Shola.
We need to talk about it. We have a lot to talk.
Until next time. All right then. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.